Welcome to the Los Angeles Tribune page. Here you will find original news programming, exclusive digital events, and shows that are directly from the community. At the Los Angeles Tribune, we believe in giving a voice to the voiceless. We are proud to be the only national brand to empower everyday people to make a difference. Since 1886, our reputation has been built on truth and responsibility. Thank you for watching and making a difference.
For general inquiries, contact today. Thank you on behalf of the Los Angeles Tribune team.
Everybody, I should unmute my mic. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the special segment that we started 2 months ago, and that is a segment on today's world. Different topics, different things are happening in the world. Whatever we find important, or whatever I find important. And for those topics, I invite different guests. This time, today, instead of concentrating on some of the issues that you may have been expecting, I wanted to shed some light onto neurological diseases. Now, there are a number of them, and you may actually know someone who suffers or lives with one, whether it is Alzheimer's, autism, whether it is epilepsy, whether it is Parkinson's disease. There are so many different ones. And you have heard of some just recently, I'm sure. There was also, I want to say a couple of years, an ALS challenge. So you probably have heard of some of these. And today I want to invite you to actually learn more about them from 2 or 3 different perspectives. So the first person that I'm going to bring in as my guest today is Mark Colo, who has helped me organize all of the experts today. Hello, Mark. I know it's early. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm so delighted to be on your show. I've been waiting for this moment for so long. And thank you for setting this up as well on your part. I know it's a lot of work to put these broadcasts out.
Oh,
I probably should be the last one to go, Natalie, though. I'm probably at the bottom of the list from these other illustrious guests who are on the show, but I'm thankful to participate.
Well, it is not about who's first or who's last, because we all have different experiences. The next person that I'm going to bring in is Dr. Howard Fedorov. Good morning also to you in California, very early this morning.
Good morning.
Dr. Fedorov, tell everybody a little bit about yourself before I bring in our next special guest, please.
Yeah, very, very briefly, I've been privileged as a physician scientist to hold a number of different jobs along the way, including most recently being the CEO of a startup company in San Diego. I spent the balance of my career focused on research and more focused on Parkinson's disease than any other neurologic indication. And consequent to that, have been compelled to try to make a difference, to bring new therapies into clinical development, and if any are successful, to change the lives of patients. Most recently, I became the chief medical officer of a new stem cell company called Rhine Bio, where we're trying to advance a dopaminergic cell product to give time back to Parkinson's patients.
Wow. Okay, that was a whole lot, but it is clear that you are very engaged, and I so appreciate that
Thank
because
you.
from what I see is there's not enough knowledge about what is actually happening. And so the next person, without any further ado, that I'm going to bring in is Mr. Larry Linton. And if I'm understanding this correctly, and feel free to always correct me, is that you actually are in Canada and you are a spokesperson, as well as, according to my information, a patient. Could you tell us a bit more about yourself, Larry?
Thank you, and good morning, and nice to see you, Mark. Good to meet you, Howard, and Natalie. Thanks for having me on. I've been living with Parkinson's for over 10 years, and I've reached the point that my story is no longer my story with Parkinson's. It's a community event. So I've used my lived experience to advocate, to educate, and to educate people to live well with Parkinson's. I hope to give you a sort of unique perspective as far as Parkinson's in Canada is concerned, because we do have quite a unique situation. I'd be happy to share that. But for now, thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry. So, a different perspective. Everybody knows that we are coming from different parts of the world as well. I'm over here in Europe all by my lonesome self. The next person that I'm going to bring on is one more colleague, friend of Mark's, and that is Dan. Dan, welcome also. And I'm blanking right now on your last name, so I sincerely apologize. I know I had it before because I know I had you on my list. Dan, welcome. And will you share a little bit about yourself as well, please?
Okay, I thank you for having me. As you can hear in my voice, I have ALS. I was diagnosed about 6.5 years ago. So I've lived with it for quite a while.
Thank you so much for making time to share with us. All four of you have unique experiences, and I invite the audience, as always, to pose questions, ask questions, comment, as always. Mark, I'm going to just ask you first of all, because I know that you and I, we've met a few years ago through a common acquaintance. And I remember you talking about neural health and really being engaged, not just in one neurological issue, but really trying to find answers to all of them. What is your journey like, and how did you connect with these other amazing three gentlemen?
Well, first, I want to say that there are no coincidences in life, just miracles. And each person on this call today is a miracle in my book, because the odds of us meeting one another, especially Howard, I've known Howard for many years now, and the odds of meeting Howard, in the situation we did was just so astronomically unclear. But you just know, in looking the way we met, there's a miracle there. I throughout high school, they used to call me a solo colo, and I never quite understood why they called me solo colo, but I guess because I was pretty self-sufficient. So it's been a challenge to transition from self-sufficiency to, hey, can you help me button my shirt, or can you help me with this tie, or make sure I don't fall out of the bed tonight. It's just there's all these little things that you have to think about when you have one of these diseases. It can be enormous. But so that's just a little bit about my background. My latest thought, Natalie, has been adaptability proliferates possibilities. And I've been thinking about that in my situation. What can I do with this condition that I might not try and do otherwise? And one of the things I've done is take up golf. And there's so many golf lessons in life. Harvey Penick said golf is a series of mistakes with a few good shots in between. So I found that to be a true statement. But it's just been a journey for me, and it's been one of enlightenment. And there's been many positive things that have happened from this, but yeah, it's a challenge at times. It can be a challenge.
I can imagine. I can imagine. And I want to invite all of you, because you gentlemen are the experts. You can just, follow each other as well in a free conversation when you have a thought. Well, let me ask you, Howard, you've mentioned being dedicated right now, committed to working on Parkinson's. How has that worked? Because I would assume, historically speaking, that it's not easy to make a case for a neurological disease that needs funding, that needs attention. So what has that journey been to where you are now with these three gentlemen, but also with the startup company and the work that you've been doing in general?
Yeah, thank you. I'll give you the very brief version. It really begins in a conversation that I had with a grant officer at the Department of Defense who invited me to come to Congress and meet with a subcommittee that was being formed in the House that was interested in thinking about funding for Parkinson's disease. So we spent a whole day on the Hill. We spoke to a lot of people who were interested. And at the end of the day, a small group of people who were trying to put together an allocation for what would have been a DoD category made the decision to create what was then called the Neurotoxin Treatment Exposure Program, NETRIP. They moved one fighter plane equivalent into the Parkinson's category, and they started funding research that they still continue to do to this day. The other thing I'll mention, sometimes I wind up being a little too vocal, and I took a meeting. This was with the then NIH director, Ilyas Sahuni. Together with several others, I complained about inadequate funding for Parkinson's. It's mostly through the Neurologic Institute, the NINDS. And he said, I understand. He says, but what you really need to do is to look at models that have been successful elsewhere and look at HIV. And he said, if you really are motivated, put together a worldwide event. And so we did. Together with Stan Fahn, I co-founded the World Parkinson's Congress. The first one was held in Washington, D.C. in 2006, and it's been serially held year after year. I did the first program trying to interface patient care, clinical care, and science. We got a little overboard because the meeting was too long. It was 5 days, and it probably should have been a few days shorter. But it was eye-opening to me because it was the beginning of what has been an increasingly more refined journey for me, which is to understand what are the newest and best ways to think about developing a therapy. Briefly, I entered gene therapy when I was a young investigator. I brought it into the clinic at the NIH, a phase 1 trial with colleagues. That became a company, and now they're bringing that therapy into phase 2 as we speak. I was interested in protein therapy. Amgen failed to bring a protein therapy into PD. The then chief science officer allowed me to come and review their data, and what was clear is they didn't know how to deliver the protein. We formed the company. We built a device. We implanted it in Europe, and we got as far as doing a phase 2B. And I'm very glad to report that there's a resurgence in interest, and there's a new company that's been formed, which I advise and now chair the board of, called Vivify. And there will be another run at this very interesting protein to be delivered directly into the brain of Parkinson's patients. And finally, I won't spend a lot of time, but the thing that's become clear to me is that the quality of life issues that attend the diagnosis are singularly the most important thing to understand. I practiced medicine for about 20 years. And when you talk to families and to patients, it's clear what matters, notwithstanding the fact that you can make a lot of different statements based on the literature. The most important thing for me right now is to give back time. So that's why I entered the stem cell arena with the hope that if we're successful, although this sounds complex, we believe that we will be able to take a dopaminergic cell progenitor. When put in the brain, it then reforms the circuits in the brain that were lost in Parkinson's patients. So I'm extraordinarily passionate about this. I don't know that there's a better opportunity that I've ever seen, and I've been involved in several others. But my hope is that over the next several years, we will know. And I can tell you from many perspectives that the people with Parkinson's, the advocates that I talk to regularly, they're all rooting for us. So I'm hoping that we can be successful. It's a challenge, but I think we're going to at least get into the clinic, and I hope then we can demonstrate benefit.
Well,
I have a follow-up. No, Larry, you've got something? You want to jump in?
yeah, I just wanted to jump in to say, well, I'm rooting for you too, Howard, because I think you need people like you to rally for us and for us to band together to spread the word about what Parkinson's is. I mean, I don't have to tell you that it's the fastest growing neurological disease in the world.
Right.
And in Canada, the statistics are pretty horrific in terms of people being diagnosed and on a worldwide basis. And similarly, if it could be a pandemic in a sense, because it's indiscriminate, it's growing. Canada is one of the countries that leads the prevalence of diagnoses every year, and that's scary. And we need to band together and shake the political tree as much as we can, thanks to you and thanks to the PD community as well. And also, thank you for the research. I mean, I'm a person like Mark living with Parkinson's, and we have to do that every day. And we live with that every day. But I have great faith in the research that is being done. I mean, I concentrate on how I can live the best life that I can with PD while people are hunched over their microscopes and advocating for a cure. And I'm doing that in the hope and the dream that one day we'll be talking about Parkinson's in historical terms, having had Parkinson's and having lived through Parkinson's. Not what we're doing at the moment. So thank you.
Thank you.
And that fits in. I don't want to forget about Dan with ALS. But when it comes to Parkinson, Larry, you just mentioned the numbers are rising. And that is something that I've been observing. And I wasn't sure whether it was just me paying more attention to neurological diseases, whether it is Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's, etc. But it seems to me that there's an increase in all of these pretty much. Do we know why? Is there a reason why?
I don't know the reason why. I mean, on the medical side, I'll defer to Howard and others, but there's no known cause for Parkinson's. In Canada, officially, there are 100,000 people living with Parkinson's. But I do know from personal experience, by doing some work in the community, that number is very conservative. In fact, in 2021, 30 people were being diagnosed in Canada per day. And that is expected to rise to 50 per day within the next 10 years. I think there's a greater awareness of Parkinson's and a greater increase in knowledge that people have about Parkinson's that is making them go to the physicians to get diagnosed. So statistically, Parkinson's is not going away, but there's obviously challenges in access to care, timely diagnosis, educating the patient. These are the challenges as well. So we've got the problems, but I think we've got some barriers and we've got some solutions as well that I hope we can talk about. But in terms of the growing numbers, on a worldwide basis, by the year 2040, I think there's going to be over 12 million people with Parkinson's on a worldwide basis. So, I'm a member of a gang that has membership wide open, unfortunately, with Parkinson's. And I think the challenge is to live well with it, because with those statistics, a large number of people are being diagnosed at an earlier age and therefore living longer with Parkinson's. And what Mark has set up is the needs of what we all have to face with being diagnosed with Parkinson's at a younger age. It's not only dealing with us as the patient, but it's also dealing with all of the community and the other challenges. I was diagnosed at 49, mid-career. I was working, had a family, had a mortgage, and there were more psychological challenges that I faced in having to deal with Parkinson's than the physical symptoms of Parkinson's themselves. So there's a great need for people in the young onset world to have the support. And that's what Mark has set up. And I think it's a tremendous initiative.
Thank you, Larry. Mark.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. I didn't realize you were early onset for diagnosis there, Larry. That's a very small percentage of patients that actually get diagnosed that young. I was 48 years old. I had a spouse. I had 3 children under the age of 10. I lived in a nice, affluent neighborhood called Newport Coast. My neighbors included Kobe Bryant, Karl Malone, Vanna White, Dean Koontz, and life was exceptionally good. That same year, I went in and met with a specialist who said, Mark, I hate to give you this news, but I think you've got Parkinson's disease. Didn't know much about it, but I've learned a lot about it. I still feel myself as somewhat of a layman in terms of understanding the disease. So that's why it's so great for people like Howard who can really describe it. But I've come up with about 37 bodily functions that are impacted significantly when you have this disease called Parkinson's. So, and some of them are very, very serious challenges. But I share that because I think we need to increase the awareness among the public about how challenging these diseases are. I often tell people, yeah, I have Parkinson's disease, just to kind of calm them down a little bit before they start talking with me. And invariably they'll tell me, oh, my aunt's uncle had it, and this is how it affected him. And it's a wonderful conversation, but Parkinson's affects everyone completely differently. Many different ways that it makes its way inroad to the body functions. So I would be grateful if someone would just say, hey, I notice you're shaking a little bit. Can I ask what that is? Well, that's Parkinson's disease. Wow, I know nothing about that, but I'm here to help you. How can I help you with that? That's all I want to hear. That would just make me feel so thrilled that somebody wants to learn about Parkinson's, learn more about it, and hopefully one day become an advocate.
Yeah. And we've talked a little bit about Parkinson's now, and the fact, because 3 of you are experts in that, and how, using Mark's word, it affects everybody differently. Dan, what about ALS? We've heard, through the challenges, something about ALS, but I doubt that people like me really know what ALS is and how it impacts you as a person and family members. Would you mind sharing a little bit with us your experience?
Okay, ALS affects all voluntary muscles. They basically move from fully functioning to paralyzed. And when I was diagnosed, I was given 2 to 5 years to live. And that's because 80%, I think, die within 5 years because your respiratory, your voluntary muscles of breathing stop working and your lungs fill up. So I don't know why I've been blessed to be here 6.5 years, but it's kind of like what they talked about is adjusting when something quits working. You have to adjust and compensate for it. And it's kind of the same way in that it affects everybody differently. And it's kind of amazing. It'll attack different parts of the body at different rates.
And may I ask, because Mark and Larry volunteered, they were living their lives, they were working, and then boom, everything came to a halt. Was it a similar experience for you?
Yeah, I worked as a federal mine inspector, and so I would visit mines, and I was in one that was the roadways were 18% grade, and I kept on falling. And then that just progressed over the 2 years and until I needed assistance, and then they told me I couldn't come to work anymore and had to learn about all of that with disability, and it's quite a challenge.
I can imagine. And I see everybody nodding. Larry?
Yeah. Yes, this whole issue of disability and accommodation in the workplace, it is a challenge, Dan, and thanks for sharing that. I think the downside is that with Parkinson's, as Mark alluded to, a lot of the symptoms are invisible, and you don't see them. I get complimented, how well I look, and I really appreciate that. But internally, things are still happening, every day. So when you're in a work environment, you can always put on a show, and you can always, fake it until you make it. But as the disease progressed, in my case, the intersection between the progression of the disease and my executive functioning crossed, and I could no longer function at that high level. And it was performance, not the disease. That was the issue. So there's a great opportunity to educate an employer, but also the challenge is to educate the insurance companies about what Parkinson's is. The famous insurance story is somebody being videotaped while they're at gym, running or swimming. And with Parkinson's patients, that should be prescribed as medicine for us. Movement and exercise is so important, probably as important as taking my medication every day. But if an insurance company sees me, running on a treadmill, they say, well, but you can't be totally disabled. You can't have a disease that prevents you from working. How come, you're not at work? So that's the issue with Parkinson's is that invisibility aspect to it, and a great opportunity for educating the public. Sometimes I start slurring my words in the afternoon, and people think I must be drunk, if I'm at a social event, or tripping over my feet when I'm getting off my bike, for example. People think there's something up. There is something up, but they've got a different interpretation. So it's a great opportunity to educate, and the more people that listen, that we can share our lived experience, I think that's the challenge, but also the opportunity.
Yeah. And let me follow up on all of those, because I think it was Dr. Fedorov who earlier mentioned the quality of life. So Mark, you mentioned, it would be great if somebody just say, hey, you're shaking, what can I do? And I'm inferring with you, Larry, instead of assuming that you're drunk, maybe asking, hey, are you okay? What's going on? And the same with Dan, probably. So the quality of life, and I'm going to be very precise for you personally, but also for your family members, because you did mention that you have family members. What is the impact on everybody?
Well, if I could jump onto that point, the impact is devastating, because, in my case, I was the primary provider. So your roles immediately change, because I'm not the person that I used to be. I'm a different person. So I have the disease, but the burden and responsibility falls to my family. I'm very lucky in the sense that I've got a family in the healthcare profession who keep a very close eye on me in terms of my diet and my exercise. I'm their worst patient, and their worst customer. But nonetheless, I know that they have got my best interests at heart, obviously. But the quality of life, I think, starts with us, the patient, because I think that quality of life is there. What I focus on now, to Dan's point and the other points that have been made, is I focus on what I can do and don't focus on what I can no longer do. It's a sliding scale. I'm not functioning at 100% that I used to, in my opinion. It's what I can do, and I take comfort in those periods of time where I am mobile, where I am lucid, where I can function. I have my best times, in fact, in the morning. So I know that I do my best work in the hours, from 8 to 12. So it's a compromise, but you can still have quality. And if I'm feeling good, then the burden is lessened to a certain extent by my family. And I think that's the ongoing issue. It's the compromise, it's the acknowledgement, but still taking comfort and celebrating those mini victories within this journey of having to live with Parkinson's.
Mark, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I'm very much aware of the added burden that my condition puts on my family members. To the depth of that, I'm not sure, but I know everyone, I've heard it said that 1 in every 4 people will suffer from MMD, what's it, medical, I can't remember. MMD, it's the major type of depression. 1 in every 4 people on the planet will probably have some of that to some degree. So I'm sure that, the fairy tale life that I had once in my mind ahead of time that turned into, put the brakes on and to turn me in a different direction. I'm sure that's had a psychological impact on my family members. I'm sure it has. I'd be foolish if I didn't think that. But I'm just thankful I married a strong woman, for one, who puts up with me. And all my little idiosyncrasies that have come up since we first got married, I'm so thankful to have met her and be her partner, because she makes my life so much easier. I'm grateful for that. But I'm wondering, what's the impact that Parkinson's has on other diseases as well? Howard could probably answer this one, but I came up with a new medical term. Howard's going to probably frown when I say it, but I have type 2 diabetes. So I've got a new condition called Parkinetes. Does that work, Howard? Was that plausible?
Well, I think it'll need some adaptation. To quote you.
I love it. Yeah.
Dan, and Mark, thank you so much, because one of the issues that I wanted to address was, depression as part of this in the patients as well. Howard, I'm going to come back to you at some point, as well as the doctors or the family members. Dan, how is that with you? Mark shared, that there are additional diseases that keep popping up, that it's very tough on everybody. How's your experience in that area?
Well, my family has seen me to move from walking to in a wheelchair most of the time. I can still transfer, so that's a blessing, but I have a wonderful wife that sticks with me and picks up the slack for things I can't do. I have 2 kids that live here in town, and they help me, and so without their support, I couldn't do it. And I know it affects, like my son in his profession. He could make a lot more money elsewhere, but he stays here because of me. So I worry about that, but he sure helps. So I'm glad he's here. So yeah, it affects him. I haven't had any problem with depression, and I think I'm lucky because of that. I more laugh my way through it than cry through it. So that seems to work.
Yeah.
Well, there's that saying, laughter is the best medicine. But when I listen to you all, it's like, wow, it takes a lot of courage to still laugh in this situation.
Yeah.
Larry?
Yeah, just to add to that point, I think the one common element that I've seen throughout my journey with Parkinson's is a sense of humor. I think we've got to take the good with the bad, and I've actually come up with my top 10 list of the perks of Parkinson's, and I wrote about that. I mean, one of it is never having to buy an electric toothbrush. You know, all my glasses of milk turn into milkshakes. So I think laughter is important. I think it helps us cope, and because we live with a chronic illness every day, I think it's okay to take some time out and laugh at ourselves and laugh with the community as well, because that's how we can sustain each other.
I do want to ask a follow-up question. If somebody like you, Larry, poses a joke like that, you know, a little saying that makes you laugh, and Mark was laughing along with you, as somebody who doesn't have a chronic disease like that, I'm hesitant to laugh. On the one hand, you know, I want to join in because I understand why you're saying it and why, you know, and I want to support you with laughing. But on the other hand, I'm not having that same chronic disease, so I might worry about how you feel if I laugh with you.
I think I can only talk about myself, and I'll invite others to comment, Mark and Dan. But you know, I don't mind. I think I've used my sense of humor throughout my life to either get me into trouble or to get me out of trouble, but also to relax myself and also the person that I'm telling the joke to. So if I'm making light of what it is, I think I'm allowed to, because I've lived with Parkinson's for 10 years. But I hope it brings down the shield of the person that wants to laugh at the same joke, because then I think then we have an opportunity for communication and an opportunity to educate each other, to understand, you know, what Parkinson's is about, and understand how we live with it as well. So I see it as a way of bringing down the barrier between, you know, ignorance and communication and knowledge and education.
That makes sense. Yeah. Mark?
Yeah, I'm not entirely into the politically correctness of things. Howard can attest to that. I just say things sometimes because it's on my cuff and I want to get it off there. But on occasion, I get to speak in public, as we're doing to a certain degree right now. Now, with Parkinson's, that can aggravate the symptom. One of the major symptoms is called a resting tremor. So sometimes I get a little bit shakier when I'm in front of a large audience, you know, and that's probably from a fear that I might say something crazy, you know what I mean? And then I think to myself, hey, I am a little bit crazy. And it takes a lot of the pressure right off me. So there's ways to deal with it from humor. And I think humor is fair game for the most part. That's my feeling.
Yeah.
You got to laugh. You have to laugh.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, I want to take a 50-second break. Then we'll come back. And then I got some very specific questions for Dr. Fedorov as well. Okay. So everybody just take a little sip of water or something. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Los Angeles Tribune page. Here you will find original news programming, exclusive digital events, and shows that are directly from the community. At the Los Angeles Tribune, we believe in giving a voice to the voiceless. We are proud to be the only national brand to empower everyday people to make a difference. Since 1886, our reputation has been built on truth and responsibility. Thank you for watching and making a difference.
For general inquiries, contact today. Thank you on behalf of the Los Angeles Tribune team.
And we're back with a panel of 4 gentlemen, either living with a chronic neurological disease and or trying to find a cure, trying to figure out how we can stem the increase. Right now, on today's world here at the Dr. Natalie Show, I want to pose a couple of questions to Dr. Fedorov, and I might even give you the spotlight because you're sort of the medical expert here. You've explained a little bit the work regarding stem cells. From your expertise as a doctor trying to find a cure, what are not the financial, but the personal challenges that you see when dealing with patients or their families? What do you think are the most important issues that we, as either non-patients or non-related people, need to consider? Well, what would you suggest we do in support?
Yeah, a great question. It's multifaceted, but one, it's really important to be able to convey a sense of hope. You know, research is part of the way that we understand better what causes disease to progress. But in my experience, when one could be very frank about what you're doing, why you're doing it, you can instill a sense of hope that the work that's being done, not just by yourself, but by many in the community, is likely to favorably impact on people who have Parkinson's disease, or for that matter, other neurologic diseases. So hope is really important. The other thing that I've learned from being involved in clinical trials is that one needs in the planning that it ultimately impacts on how the trial is conducted is to make certain that people with Parkinson's disease help to contribute so that you refine the nature of what you'd like to measure, how long it may take to be measured, that may then equate with the clinical benefit that we're all seeking when we develop new medicines. And finally, I think the thing that I've experienced, having done a large number of different scientific, clinical, and other presentations, is at the end of all of that, the most important thing is to actually listen. And I used to say to medical students, I had the fortune of being the dean of 2 schools of medicine, the most important thing that you'll learn in the 4 years in medical school is how to be a better listener. Because at the beginning of an encounter with a patient, it's not to show that you're smart and knowledgeable, but you have to understand what really is bringing them to attention and put that in the context of them and their family in order to be able to begin to arrive at a diagnosis and hopefully a treatment plan. So listen.
I have a follow-up for you on that one as well, because I've noticed, I work with some doctors, and I've noticed that there's a lot of pressure on doctors to not be emotional. You're supposed to be factual and just tell Larry, well, guess what, Larry? Bad news, but here it is. Dan, sorry to tell you, here it is, and here's what you can do now. So it's all very functional, mechanical. So how does a doctor, or how do medical students deal with that? You saying you need to understand all of it. How can we handle that given the pressures on doctors to be more, I don't know, can't find the right word. Let me rephrase. On doctors to not be emotional.
Yeah, I think the construct for maybe all of the medical schools, both in Canada and the United States, is really to introduce to first-year medical students, really through a series of encounters with patients, about what it's like to be a patient. And really, you know, there's a certain humanistic quality to understanding emoting and not being dispassionate, but actually understanding the nature of what the patient is presenting with. I think that one of the big challenges in clinical medicine really relates to the pressures that are being borne on them to be more productive. And I often have had a chance to speak with colleagues, both nationally and internationally, And just in my own private experience, the thing that I would really find very challenging is that not every patient, a new patient, could be seen in 50 minutes. And you do a disservice to, one, those who schedule you, but at the same time, mostly to patients and their families if you're compelled to complete a new patient evaluation in a prescribed period of time. It just doesn't comport because every patient is different. So, when I was the CEO of the medical center, I used to find myself at odds, sometimes even with myself, about, in that position, you really want to grow your market, grow your accessibility to care, but at the same time, there's pressure to actually generate a bottom line. And it would not be infrequent that I would be discussing with those who are attending physicians, those in training as fellows or medical students or residents, that everyone has to find a way to do this. Where, we've committed to really wanting to help to take care of patients. Mm-hmm. And it's not an artificial construct. It's part of who we are humanistically. And if we don't recognize how to connect and be more authentic in those interactions, I don't think that you optimize the experience for the patient or their families.
Mm-hmm. 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 What do you gentlemen think? You all go to doctors. Yeah, Mark, you go first.
I just want to say, I don't know anyone that's as authentic, as good a listener, and as emotional about the subject than Howard.
No,
I've known Howard for 7 or 8 years now. We met in very unusual circumstances. I wish I could tell you the whole story, but I don't have time. Howard could tell it to you offline, maybe.
Yeah.
But essentially, I had a client at UC Irvine who was trying to hire a high-level individual, and she called me up and said, "Mark, can you move laboratories?" I said, "Yeah, I can do it." She said, "No, can you move laboratories?" I said, "Yeah, well, yeah." I said, "I can do it." "No, I have to know for sure if you can move laboratories." And I said, her name was Diane. I said, "Diana, what are you worried about? This guy coming on board is going to be my boss's boss, and if you mess it up, I'm going to lose my job." So I said, "No pressure there, no pressure. I'll take care of it." And of course I was terrified because I was in an industry called relocation, and I know it's fraught with human error. Howard's probably moved a dozen times or more, and it's just a difficult industry to control everything. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I called Howard up and I said the $1 million question I ask everybody. I said, "Howard, what's your biggest concern about your relocation?" And he said, "I've got 13 cryogenic freezers with 40,000 brain samples of individuals who passed away with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. I can't afford anything to go wrong with that. That's my life's work." You can imagine how I felt when he said that. And I said, "What else are you concerned about?" We said, "If the temperature raises or drops more than 3 degrees, it'll compromise my samples. I can't afford that. Can you guarantee that won't happen?" Mm-hmm. And I was petrified. And I said, "Howard, you'll be happy to know I've got a vested interest in getting you out here in good shape." He said, "Can I ask what that is?" I said, "I have Parkinson's." He went dead silent for several seconds, processing. And then he said to me, "Tell me about it." I had no idea he even knew about Parkinson's until he shared some of that dialogue with me. Mm-hmm. And I looked him up afterwards and I thought, for a man with this much knowledge and experience, for him to say, "Tell me about it," that was pure kindness from my perspective. So thank you, Howard.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Yeah. Wow. Larry.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think it goes to the success of a relationship with your specialist that puts the patient at the center of care. And I think that's the biggest issue. Howard's point about listening, it gives us the opportunity for ourselves to be vulnerable and to to tell the whole story, where in return the treatment is not only the patient but a holistic treatment of the person in the community, with family, with those challenges. And I think that is the great success that awaits us if you have that good patient, physician, specialist relationship. I think that sets us up for quality of life, for success, and to continue to live a good quality of life. It all starts fundamentally with that relationship. And to Howard's other point, in terms of access to care, that was one of the things that I wanted to say about Canada, is that quicker diagnosis would allow us to get onto treatment far quicker. And I think the education at the general physician level is something that could be looked at, so that there are specific physicians who are then interested perhaps in Parkinson's, but at least it could allow for a better education at the doctor level for quicker referral to a diagnosis by specialists.
Yeah, so it is the listening, it's the understanding, and it's also the general information sharing, right?
Right.
So that the general doctors, the pediatrician, the family doctor might say, not sure what this is. How about we test you for some things? Yeah. Okay. Okay. That of course sounds kind of complicated. Because we know how that works sometimes, especially in an age where everything is just on the computer and you just hit a few buttons, and half the doctors that I've known lately, well, not lately, but a year ago, most of them just looked at the screen and not at the patient.
Right.
And I don't even have a chronic disease. So, Mark, I do have a specific question that we want to give you the spotlight as well, because you did help me. You're fundamental in bringing together this panel. And you, as I mentioned, have this organization that is called Find Neuro Help. And in that, you mentioned a number of things on your website, the individual and the family members, and all those things that are part of living with a neurological disease. Can you just tell the audience and me, again, a little bit about this organization, what you hope to achieve with it, and how people can find it, and what kind of help you provide or need?
Well, the website is findneurohelp.org. That's how you can reach us and learn more about us. But our model that we came up with, our service model, is called the Perimeter of Hope. And each of those categories, if you can successfully solve each of those categories, you bring greater hope to the individual. We started out our foundation, and we're a 501c3. We started out the foundation just funding research, such as Howard. I funded a number of projects he was involved with, and other scientists. But we were just writing checks to these organizations that we were hopeful that would be the next, cure, find the next cure for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, these other diseases. But as time went on, we thought, I want to help the individual that's right on the streets with these conditions. So we started writing checks to individuals that could find no financial support, any other means for what they had without our help. And we write a check to these individuals. I have some letters that I cherish from these individuals about what we were able to do for them. One woman went back to college after many years. She couldn't afford to go back to college, so it helped pay her tuition. She had a son who was actually going to the same college she was going to, and he had autism. But some people with autism are really brilliant in some facets. And this young man, he made these paper mache images, paper mache models of places within Disneyland. He did the Disneyland castle out of just cutting paper, folding it together and taping it. It was just remarkable. So anyway, it opened into other avenues, and we've been thankful to have it going for about 6 years now. We've had 6 very successful golf tournaments. We're happy about that. And I've learned to play my game a little bit better, which is good. That's always positive. But that's just a little bit about the foundation.
And Mark, you just mentioned autism, and relating back to some of the issues that I think you all mentioned, because sometimes we hear different things, is allowing people with chronic diseases to have a regular life, to have a job, and so forth. And lately we've been hearing a lot about job opportunities for autistic people. Autism seems to be more, dare I say, accepted than Parkinson's, then ALS, then Alzheimer's. They're seeking out more opportunities. I'm not sure why that is, but I wanted to mention that because it strikes me as something quite important. Do any of you have a comment on that? You don't have to. It's just something that popped into my head.
I'll just say I have one son. I've got two children at home. I love them to death, but I sometimes joke and say they have failures to launch because they haven't gotten in the workplace yet. But I know they'll find their footing soon. But one of them, I think, might have a form of autism. We're doing some testing right now with him and trying to find out what's going on with him, because it does bring challenges, but also brings many opportunities, as you've mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
There's still work that can be done if you have autism. Howard could probably speak better to that topic than I can, or maybe even Dan might have some comments as well. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been following the Centers of Excellence of E&Y, which is a professional services firm worldwide, and they have got a mission and a commitment to hiring of people on the so-called spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And they find that is good for business, but more importantly, good for the individuals, because they are employable and make good employees. But what the commitment is that the hiring practices have to change, because a person who is not that sociable can do a good job if given the opportunity, but is not going to answer an ad that says, must have good interpersonal skills. A person may not think that they have that and will rule themselves out because they don't think that they can do the job. So I think a lot of organizations are following that, and I think it's so important. And it's an opportunity, going back to my major point, of educating the public that people with on the spectrum, with neurodiverse individuals, are still employable, are still valuable, can still make a contribution, similar to people with Parkinson's. I am working again. I'm not functioning at that high level that I used to be, but at least I feel that I'm contributing. I feel valued. I still think I've got years of experience to teach and mentor, younger lawyers coming through. So it's a great conversation and a great initiative to know that there are employers that are willing to accommodate and employ, and again educate the general public.
Yeah, I think that's, especially with the numbers possibly increasing, and with the need, as Dr. Fedorov was pointing out, we need to be aware. We need more funding. We need to actually do some testing to see if these new ideas and procedures might work. We are almost out of time, and I don't really want the show to end, but I would like each of you, I'm going to give you each individually the spotlight. Just share what you think the audience today and in the future really needs to know, or what you would like just to share from your heart. Okay. So Larry, I'm going to just start out with you. Anything that comes to mind.
Well, thank you for that. Again, thank you for having me on. I think the biggest issue is that with Parkinson's, I've become a better person. With Parkinson's, I know my purpose in life. With Parkinson's, I've become a better listener. And with Parkinson's, I've enjoyed a more fulfilling life, rewarding, that has in most respects been better before my diagnosis. So to Howard's point right at the beginning, in terms of time, Parkinson's gave me the time to look at myself and allow me to recalibrate, to reset, and recenter myself, to actually make me a better person. And my final word is to people that there is still a quality of life that follows a diagnosis with a chronic illness. There is still a life to live. You reach that point of acceptance, and then you can move on with your life. And as I said, don't focus on what you can no longer do, focus on what you can do. So thank you for that.
Very powerful. Focus on what you can do. Dan, what are your words to the global audience today and in the future? What do you want them to know?
Well, I've been amazed at how kind people are and how good people are to someone who's struggling and handicapped, and people are amazingly kind that will stop and help or smile, and I've just been really pleased to see that.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Fedorov, final words for today.
Well, first, let me begin and thank you for including me. And it's been a pleasure to get to know Dan and Larry, and Mark and I have gone back some years. I'll just start with just a couple of points. One is that there is a tremendous amount of interest, enthusiasm to try to find ways to slow this disease, maybe even detect it earlier and abate its progression at that point. And we can't do it alone. We are incredibly grateful, not just for the volunteerism, but the interest that people might have in being considered and then volunteering to participate in a clinical trial. It's challenging, usually, particularly the type of work that myself and my colleagues are doing. But I think this is the only way we can move forward. I think it is incumbent upon us to find both the best ideas, the best people, and be able to move the ball down the field to a point where we might be able to say in a few years hence, we have something that might actually make a difference. So I want to thank all of the people with Parkinson's, and realize that this is going to be seen globally, but it's not just Parkinson's. It's people who harbor and carry neurologic diseases of a chronic progressive type, such as Dan, that we all need to be mindful of, and we also need to be working to find the means to make a difference in their lives.
Thank you. And yes, that's why I think it's so important that Dan is here, because we talk about Parkinson's. It's right now in everybody's frame of mind, but there is ALS, there is Alzheimer's, there are all these other diseases that sometimes we still don't talk about as much. And so finally, Mark, it is your stage. What else would you like to share with the world today?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody that's on the call today, by the way. I know you guys have other things to do, but you see the importance of this, and I'm thankful that you guys could join me. I love each and every one of you guys. I think the first thing that comes to mind is the only constant is change. We have to learn to embrace it, because when we get these diseases, I guarantee you there's going to be some significant changes that you have to face, and they're not all bad. You might think you might be in kind of that negative state and think, oh my gosh, what's next? But that journey from why me to why not me can take place if you let it, but you have to embrace it. The second principle I have is, if you think things can't get worse, you're wrong. And I don't mean that too humorously, but I think things can get worse. It can become a slippery slope as one thing leads to another. Suddenly find yourself with Parkinson's, for example. So you got to accept that. You got to press forward. Sometimes all you can do is press forward from day to day. And then the last thought I've got is that adaptability proliferates possibilities. And the more adaptable we can be when we get these conditions, the better off we're going to be for ourselves and those around us. So those are my remaining thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you all so much. I know where you are, it's been very early for everybody. So I can't thank you enough for making the time, sharing your information, your expertise, your insights, and your personal experiences. This is today's world where we need to address those issues as well. Please feel free, and I'm going to say this while still on the air, to put your information for your startup company, for your interest, also, under the thread in Facebook, in LinkedIn, wherever this is. I want to thank you, and to everybody who's been listening. We've got a quiet but good audience again today. So I want to thank everybody, and that is the end for today's show. Everybody else, I'm probably going to come on with a regular Dr. Natalie show before the end of the year. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.